On a Tuesday evening in late autumn, the city breathed out a slow sigh of exhaust and steam. The streets were slick from an earlier rain, and the air carried that familiar mix of wet pavement, roasted nuts from a corner cart, and the faint hum of distant traffic. Underground, the subway rattled through its usual rhythm, doors sliding open, voices murmuring, shoes scuffing against worn tiles. It was one of those ordinary moments that millions of people live through every day without a second thought. But sometimes, in the middle of the ordinary, something unforgettable happens. An elderly woman stepped onto the train at the Lake Street station. She moved carefully, one hand gripping the metal pole, the other holding a faded canvas tote bag close to her side. Her coat was old but clean, buttoned all the way up despite the warmth of the car. She found a seat near the middle, sat down with a soft exhale, and rested the bag on her lap like it was something precious, which to her it was. Inside were a few groceries, a small photo in a worn frame, and a pocket watch that had belonged to her husband. He'd passed 5 winters ago, but she still carried it with her every Tuesday, the day they used to go downtown together for lunch. It wasn't about the money or the object. It was about keeping a promise she'd made to herself, to keep living like he was still walking beside her. The train rolled on, lights flickering slightly as it passed beneath the city. Most passengers were lost in their own worlds, earbuds in, eyes on phones, or just staring blankly at the ads above the windows. Near the back of the car, a man in a dark hoodie sat with his shoulders slightly hunched, his gaze fixed on the floor. He wasn't drawing attention to himself, and no one paid him any mind. He looked like any other tired commuter, just another face in the crowd. But if someone had looked closer, they might have recognized him. Not that he wanted to be recognized. He was just trying to get from one place to another without causing a stir, enjoying the rare quiet that came with being unseen. The woman didn't notice him. She was smoothing the edge of her bag with her thumb, lost in a memory. She remembered how her husband used to tap that watch against his palm when he was thinking hard about something, usually how to fix the kitchen sink or whether they should take that trip to the coast they kept talking about but never made. They never did go. Life got busy, then he got sick, and then, well, but she still talked to him sometimes, especially on Tuesdays. "You'd love this weather," she'd whisper. "Cool, but not too cold. Just how you liked it." At the next stop, the doors hissed open and a young man stepped on. He couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. His jacket was too thin for the season, and his eyes darted around the car like he was scanning for something or someone. He stood near the doors, shifting his weight from foot to foot. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, but his shoulders were tense like he was coiled tight and ready to spring. Most people avoided looking at him directly. Not out of fear exactly. Just the kind of instinctive caution city folks develop after years of navigating crowded spaces. Something about him felt off, like a song playing just slightly out of tune. The elderly woman didn't seem to notice. She was watching the lights blur past the window, her reflection faint in the glass. She looked tired but peaceful. She'd had a good day, visited her granddaughter, shared a slice of peach cobbler, laughed about a story from years ago. Now she was heading home, carrying that warmth with her like a small flame in her chest. The train lurched forward again, and the young man took a step toward the middle of the car. His eyes landed on the woman's bag, the way it sat so openly on her lap, the glint of metal peeking out from the top. He hesitated for just a second. That second was all it took. In that moment, 1,000 thoughts probably raced through his head. Bills piling up, his little sister asking for new shoes, the landlord's warning taped to his door. He wasn't a bad person. He'd never done anything like this before. But desperation has a way of narrowing your vision until all you can see is the thing you think will fix everything. Before anyone could react, he lunged. One quick motion. Grab the bag, shove her shoulder just enough to throw her off balance, and bolt for the doors. The woman gasped, more from shock than pain, and her hand flew out to steady herself against the seat. The bag was gone in less than 3 seconds. A few people turned their heads, eyes wide, but no one moved. No one shouted. It happened so fast that it felt unreal, like something from a movie rather than real life. But in the back of the car, the man in the hoodie stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't charge forward like an action hero. He just rose to his feet, calm and steady, and started walking toward the doors as they began to close. His expression wasn't angry. It was focused, like someone who'd seen this kind of moment before and knew exactly what it cost. He didn't look at the other passengers. His eyes were locked on the platform ahead, where the young man was already sprinting up the stairs, the canvas bag swinging from his hand. The train pulled away from the station, but the man in the hoodie was already moving. He'd timed it perfectly, stepping off just as the doors shut behind him, his boots hitting the platform with quiet determination. He didn't run. He walked with purpose, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed ahead. He wasn't chasing a thief. He was following a person who'd just made a terrible choice, and maybe, just maybe, there was still time to help him undo it. Back on the train, the elderly woman sat trembling, her hands empty for the first time in years. A stranger offered her a tissue. Another asked if she wanted to call someone. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My husband's watch," she said. It was in there. The words hung in the air like smoke, thin, sad, and impossible to grab hold of. Above ground, the city kept moving. Cars honked. People hurried home. Streetlights blinked on one by one. And somewhere between the subway exit and the alley where the young man would eventually stop to catch his breath, a quiet man in a hoodie was closing the distance, not with fury, but with something far more powerful: understanding. Because sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do isn't to fight, but to see someone clearly even when they're trying to disappear. And in that moment, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, two strangers were about to change each other's lives. Not with violence, not with judgment, but with a single choice made in the space between fear and hope. The young man ran like his life depended on it, which in his mind it kind of did. His heart hammered against his ribs, each breath sharp and shallow as he pounded up the subway stairs and into the cool evening air. The city stretched out before him, full of noise and motion, but all he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears and the muffled thump of the canvas bag against his side. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he did, he might see someone chasing him, or worse, he might see himself clearly for the first time in weeks. He ducked into a narrow alley between a shuttered bodega and a laundromat still humming with dryers. Leaning against the brick wall, he doubled over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His hands were shaking, not from the run, but from what he'd just done. He hadn't planned it. Not really. It wasn't like he woke up that morning thinking, "Today's the day I become a thief." But rent was due. His little sister needed new glasses, and the guy from the corner store had stopped giving him credit after the third week of "I'll pay you next Tuesday." So when he saw that bag, sitting there, unguarded on the lap of someone who looked like she wouldn't fight back, he told himself it wasn't stealing. It was survival. He unzipped the bag with trembling fingers. Inside he found a few grocery items, some fruit, a loaf of bread, and then at the bottom the watch. It was old, the metal worn smooth from years of handling, but it had weight to it. Real weight. Not flashy, not expensive looking, but the kind of thing someone would keep for a lifetime. He turned it over in his palm. Engraved on the back were two initials and a date, J&E, June 12th, 1963. A wedding date, maybe, or the day they met. He didn't know. But suddenly the bag didn't feel like a score anymore. It felt like a confession. He heard footsteps, not loud, not running, just steady, calm footsteps coming from the street. He froze, pressing himself deeper into the shadows. His first thought was the police. But the steps didn't stop at the alley entrance. They kept coming, slow, unhurried, until a figure appeared in the dim light. It was the man from the subway, the one in the hoodie. The one who'd stood up without saying a word. The young man's pulse spiked again. He braced himself, ready to bolt or throw a punch if he had to. But the man didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for his phone, didn't even look angry. He just stopped a few feet away, hands still in his pockets, and said, "She needs that." The words were quiet, simple, but they hit harder than a shout. The young man tightened his grip on the watch. "Mind your business," he muttered, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked. The man didn't move. "That's not just a watch," he said gently. "It's the last thing she has of him." "How do you know that?" The young man snapped, more defensive than he meant to be. "I don't," the man admitted, "but I've seen that look before. The way she held it. Like it was part of her." A silence settled between them, thick with everything neither of them was saying. The city noise faded into the background. The distant wail of a siren, the rumble of a bus, the laughter of kids walking home from school. The young man looked down at the watch again. He thought about his own mother, how she still kept his father's old work boots by the door even though he'd been gone 10 years. "She's going to call the cops," he said finally, more to himself than to the man. "Maybe," the man replied. But she didn't look like she wanted revenge. She looked like she just wanted it back. The young man swallowed hard. His chest felt tight. He wasn't used to people talking to him like he was still human after doing something wrong. Most folks either yelled or looked right through him. But this man, he wasn't judging. He was just standing there, offering a chance to do the right thing without making him feel like garbage for getting it wrong in the first place. "Why are you even following me?" he asked, suspicion creeping back in. "You some kind of cop? Security?" The man shook his head. "Just a guy on the train." "Then why do you care?" The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because once someone gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it, and it changed everything." The young man didn't know what to say to that. He'd never heard anyone talk like that. Like kindness was something you passed on, not something you earned. He glanced toward the street, half expecting flashing lights. But there was nothing, just the ordinary flow of evening life. "You don't have to go back," the man said softly. "But if you do, she'll understand. More than you think." The young man looked at the bag in his hands. He thought about his sister's eyes behind those cracked lenses. He thought about the shame in the woman's face when he shoved her. He thought about how tired he was. Tired of scrambling, tired of feeling invisible, tired of believing the only way out was to take from someone else. He took a deep breath. "What if she hates me?" "Then you'll apologize," the man said. "And mean it. That's all anyone can ask." Something in those words loosened the knot in his chest. Not all of it, but enough. He nodded slowly, more to himself than to the man. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay," the man didn't smile. Didn't clap him on the back. He just turned slightly, gesturing back toward the subway entrance. "Let's go." They walked side by side, not speaking. The young man kept the bag close, his steps heavy with dread and something else. Relief, maybe. Or hope. He wasn't sure yet. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel alone. When they reached the platform, the woman was still there, sitting on a bench near the ticket booth. A transit worker stood nearby, offering her a cup of water. She looked smaller now. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. When she saw the young man approaching, she didn't flinch. She just watched him come closer, her expression unreadable. He stopped a few feet away. His hands were sweaty. His throat felt like it was closing up. He held out the bag. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know." She looked at the bag. Then at him. Really looked. Not with anger, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet sadness that cut deeper than any yelling ever could. "You got your whole life ahead, son," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "Don't throw it away over a bad day." He nodded, tears welling up despite his best effort to hold them back. He didn't deserve her kindness, but she gave it anyway. The man in the hoodie stayed a few steps behind, giving them space. He didn't need to say anything else. The moment wasn't about him. It was about two people, one who'd lost something precious, and one who'd almost lost himself. And in that quiet subway station, under the flickering fluorescent lights, something small but real began to heal. Not everything, not all at once, but enough to matter. The platform felt quieter than before, as if the whole station had taken a breath and held it. The hum of distant trains, the occasional chime of an arriving car, even the murmur of other passengers. It all faded into the background like static on an old radio. What mattered now was the space between the young man and the woman, thick with unspoken words and the weight of what had just happened. She didn't reach for the bag right away. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, and saw more than just the hands that had taken from her. She saw tired eyes, a jacket too thin for the season, shoes worn down at the heel. She'd been young once, too. Back when the world felt like it was closing in on all sides and every choice seemed to lead to another dead end. She knew what desperation looked like. It didn't always wear a mask of anger. Sometimes it just looked like a kid trying to keep his head above water. "You cold?" she asked suddenly, her voice gentle. He blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah," he admitted, pulling his arms tighter around himself. "A little, without a word." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a pair of gloves, knitted, slightly frayed at the cuffs, the kind you'd get from a church donation bin or a neighbor who made extras just in case. She held them out. Here, these'll help. He stared at them like they might vanish if he touched them. I can't take these. Not after what? She interrupted softly. After you made a mistake? Honey, we all do. What matters is what you do next. He hesitated, then slowly took the gloves. They were warm from being in her pocket, and he slipped them on without thinking. The simple act of kindness, the quiet, no-strings-attached kind, hit him harder than he expected. His throat tightened again. The man in the hoodie watched from a few steps away, saying nothing. He didn't need to. He knew better than to step into a moment that wasn't his. Some things only work when they come from the right person at the right time. And right now that person was her. A train rumbled into the station, brakes hissing as it slowed. Most of the waiting passengers shuffled toward the doors, but the three of them stayed put. The woman finally took the bag from the young man's hands. She opened it, checked the watch, still there, still ticking, and let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding it since the moment it was taken. You know, she said, closing the bag gently. My husband used to say that people aren't bad. They're just lost. She looked up at the young man. You lost, son? He nodded, unable to speak. Well, she said, lost don't mean gone. The man in the hoodie stepped forward then, not intruding, just joining the circle. Do you have somewhere to go tonight? He asked. The young man shrugged. Yeah, sort of. My place. But it's complicated. Complicated how? He looked down, scuffing his shoe against the tile. Rent's late. Landlord's talking about changing the locks. My sister's with me, she's 12. Mom's in the hospital. I've been trying to pick up extra shifts, but it's not enough. The man listened without interrupting. No pity in his eyes, just understanding. There's a place downtown, he said after a moment. Not a shelter. More like a community center. They help with job training, housing referrals, even school stuff for kids. I've worked with them before. Good people, the young man frowned. Why are you helping me? I stole from her. I could have hurt her. You didn't, the man said simply, and you came back. That counts for something. But you don't even know me. I know enough, the man replied, and sometimes knowing someone's trying is enough to give them a hand. The woman stood slowly, using the bench to steady herself. He's right, she said. You made a wrong turn, but you didn't keep driving. That takes courage. The young man didn't feel courageous. He felt small, exposed. But for the first time in weeks, he also felt seen, not as a problem, not as a threat, but as a person who'd stumbled and was trying to get back up. The man pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then handed it to the young man. Call this number tomorrow morning. Ask for Lena, tell her I sent you. She'll get you in, no questions asked. The young man took the phone, read the number, then nodded. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. No, the man said. Thank you for choosing to do the right thing when it would have been easier not to. A silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was calm, like the air after a storm. The woman reached into her bag once more and pulled out a small wrapped pastry, the one her granddaughter had insisted she take home. Here, she said, pressing it into his hand. You look like you haven't eaten. He almost refused, but the warmth in her eyes stopped him. Thanks, he whispered. The next train arrived, its doors sliding open with a soft chime. The woman turned to the man in the hoodie. You riding with me? She asked. He smiled faintly. If you don't mind the company, she patted his arm. Mind? Honey, after today, you're family. They boarded the train together, the young man standing on the platform as the doors closed. He watched them through the window. The elderly woman sitting with her bag on her lap again, the man beside her, both of them looking out at him as the train pulled away. The woman raised a hand in a small wave. He lifted his own, still wearing her gloves, and waved back. He stood there long after the train disappeared into the tunnel. The city buzzed around him, but inside something had shifted. He wasn't fixed. His problems hadn't vanished. But he wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Back on the train, the woman leaned slightly toward the man. You always follow thieves out of subway stations? She asked, a hint of a smile in her voice. Only the ones who look like they're about to lose themselves, he said. She nodded, looking out the window as the lights of the city blurred past. Well, thank you. For not letting him go. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Thank you for showing him he was still worth something." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Two strangers bound together by a moment that could have ended in anger, but didn't. And somewhere above them, a young man walked home with a full stomach, warm hands, and the first real hope he'd felt in a long time. The next morning came in soft and gray, the kind of dawn that feels like the world is still rubbing its eyes. The young man woke on a thin mattress in the corner of a one-room apartment that smelled faintly of mildew and yesterday's soup. His sister was already up, sitting at the small table with a notebook open, squinting at the page through her cracked glasses. She looked up when he stirred. "You okay?" she asked, her voice quiet. He sat up, rubbing his face. "Yeah," he said. "Better than yesterday." He didn't tell her what happened, not yet. He wasn't sure how to explain that he'd done something terrible, and then somehow been given a second chance. Instead, he got up, made coffee with the last of the grounds, and handed her the warmest mug. Then he pulled out the phone he'd borrowed from a neighbor, old cracked screen, but it worked, and dialed the number he'd memorized the night before. A woman answered on the third ring. "Good morning, New Horizons Community Center." Hi," he said, voice rough from sleep. "I was told to ask for Lena. Someone said to tell you he sent me." There was a pause. "Then KEANU?" He hesitated. "Yeah, that's him." She didn't sound surprised, just warm. "All right, honey, come on down. We open at 9. Bring ID if you got it. If you don't, we'll figure it out." He thanked her and hung up. His sister watched him, curious but not pushing. That was one of the things he loved about her. She knew when to wait. By 8:30 they were walking downtown, her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow like it had been since she was little. The city felt different today. Not safer exactly, but less like it was out to get him. Maybe it was the gloves still in his pocket, or the memory of that woman's voice saying, "Lost don't mean gone." Whatever it was, he walked taller. The community center was tucked between a barbershop and a bookstore, its windows bright with posters about job fairs, tutoring, and free meals. Inside, it smelled like coffee, floor cleaner, and something baking in the back, maybe banana bread. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a clipboard stood near the front desk. She looked up when they entered. "You must be the one Lena's expecting," she said with a kind smile. He nodded. "Yeah, You don't gotta say your name if you don't want to," she said gently. "Not yet. Let's just see how we can help." They sat in a small room with mismatched chairs and a table covered in pamphlets. Lena, calm, no nonsense, but with eyes that held a lifetime of listening, asked questions without making him feel like a case file. "Where are you staying? How's your mom doing? Does your sister need school supplies? Are you eating enough?" He answered honestly, surprised at how easy it was when someone wasn't judging him. By the end of the hour, she'd connected him with a temporary housing program, signed his sister up for after-school tutoring and a free eye exam, and introduced him to a local contractor who hired day laborers and didn't care about your past as long as you showed up on time and worked hard. "He starts Monday," Lena said, handing him a slip of paper with an address and a name. "Be there at 6, wear boots, and eat breakfast." He took the paper like it was gold. Over the next few weeks, things didn't magically fix themselves, but they began to bend toward something better. He showed up early every day, swept floors, carried lumber, learned how to patch drywall. The crew didn't ask about his past. They just saw he was willing to work, and that was enough. His sister got new glasses, thick black frames she loved, and started bringing home papers with gold stars. Their mom came home from the hospital, weak but smiling, and cried when she saw the apartment clean, the fridge full, her son looking less like a ghost and more like himself again. One Saturday morning, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find the elderly woman from the subway standing there holding a paper bag. She wore the same coat, but today it was buttoned over a bright yellow scarf that made her eyes sparkle. "You remember me?" she asked. He did, instantly. "Of course," he said, stepping aside. "Please come in." She didn't go far, just far enough to hand him the bag. "Bake some sweet potato pies," she said. "Thought you and your sister might like one." He took the bag, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." She didn't stay long. Just long enough to meet his sister, who offered her a drawing she'd made. A picture of 3 people on a subway train, one with a bag, one in a hoodie, and one with silver hair and a yellow scarf. The woman's eyes got shiny when she saw it. "You got talent," she told the girl. "Don't ever stop." After she left, the young man stood in the doorway for a long time, the smell of cinnamon and brown sugar drifting from the kitchen. He thought about how easy it would have been for her to hate him, to write him off. But instead, she'd shown up, with pies and kindness and no expectations. Meanwhile, the man in the hoodie hadn't been seen since that night on the platform. He didn't seek credit, didn't post about it, didn't even tell the story. But word travels in quiet ways. Someone at the community center mentioned he'd dropped off supplies, winter coats, school backpacks, gift cards for groceries. Always in cash, always anonymous. But Lena knew, and she made sure the help kept flowing. One evening, as the young man walked home from work, he passed a bus stop where a teenager was sitting with his head in his hands, looking like the world had just caved in. Without thinking, the young man slowed down. "You all right?" he asked. The kid looked up, surprised. "Just bad day." "Yeah," he said. "I know how that feels." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded flyer from the community center. "If you need somewhere to go, this place helps." No judgment, the kid took it eyes wide. "Why you doing this?" He thought for a second, then smiled faintly. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it, and it changed everything." He kept walking, the city lights flickering on around him. He wasn't a hero. He was just a person who'd been lost and found his way back thanks to a watch, a pair of gloves, and two strangers who chose kindness over fear. And in that moment, he realized the real gift wasn't the second chance. It was the chance to pass it on. Months passed and the city kept turning. Trains running on schedule, seasons shifting from gray winter to the soft green of early spring, people coming and going like waves on a shore. But in the quiet corners of everyday life, something had taken root. Not a headline, not a viral video, just a ripple, spreading outward in ways no one could measure but everyone could feel. The young man still woke before sunrise, lacing up his boots and heading to work. Only now he wasn't just carrying drywall or sweeping job sites, he was training others. The contractor had noticed his steady hands, his quiet reliability, and offered him a mentor role for new hires. "You've got away with folks," he'd said one afternoon, handing him a set of keys to the tool van. "Like you see 'em, not just their mistakes." He didn't tell his boss the whole story, but sometimes when a new guy showed up late or looked like he hadn't slept in days, he'd pull him aside, offer a coffee and say, "I've been where you are. Let's figure it out together." And more often than not, that was enough to keep someone from walking away, or worse, from making a choice they couldn't take back. His sister was doing better too. She wore her new glasses with pride, her grades had climbed, and she'd joined an after-school art club. One evening, she came home with a small canvas tucked under her arm. "It's for her," she said, nodding toward the window as if the woman might appear out of the twilight. On the canvas was a subway car, softly lit with 3 figures inside, one holding a bag, one in a hoodie, and one with silver hair and a yellow scarf. Above them, painted in careful script, were the words, "Kindness is never wasted." He hung it in their living room, right by the door, where everyone who entered could see it. As for the woman, she kept her Tuesdays sacred. Every week, she took the same train downtown, always carrying her husband's watch in her pocket, even if she left the bag at home. She never spoke about what happened that night, not to her neighbors, not even to her granddaughter, but she started volunteering at the community center once a month, helping sort donations or reading to kids during tutoring hours. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she'd learned something important, that healing doesn't always come from big gestures. Sometimes it's just showing up with pies or gloves, or a listening ear when someone's world is falling apart. One spring afternoon, she was folding donated clothes in the back room when Lena walked in, holding a stack of thank you notes from program participants. "Look at this one," she said, handing her a card with a drawing of a subway train and 3 stick figures holding hands. The woman smiled. "He's doing all right then?" "Better than all right," Lena said. "He's becoming someone others lean on." She nodded, folding a child's sweater with care. "Good. That's how it's supposed to work." Meanwhile, the man in the hoodie had long since left the city. He'd finished his work, said quiet goodbyes, and moved on, just as he always did. He never gave interviews, never posted about the incident. When a local reporter tried to track him down months later, all they got was a short message through his team. Please don't make it about me. Make it about them. And so the story stayed small, not because it wasn't powerful, but because its power came from its simplicity. It lived in the bus driver who now keeps an eye out for kids who look lost, in the teenager who returned a dropped wallet instead of pocketing the cash, in the grocery clerk who lets someone slide on a few dollars when times are tight, remembering how one act of grace can change a life. Even the subway car where it all happened felt different to those who knew. Not haunted, not dramatic, just a little softer, like the air itself remembered what happened there. Some passengers swear they've seen the elderly woman sitting quietly by the window, or caught a glimpse of a young man in work boots helping someone carry groceries up the stairs. Others say it's just a story. But stories like this don't fade. They settle into the bones of a place, becoming part of its heartbeat. One Tuesday, nearly a year after that night, the young man stood outside the community center, waiting for his sister after her art class. The sun was warm, the trees full of new leaves, and the sidewalk buzzed with the kind of hopeful energy that only spring can bring. He spotted the woman walking toward him, slower now, leaning on a cane she hadn't needed before. But her eyes were bright and she wore that same yellow scarf. "You look good," she said when she reached him. "So do you," he replied. They stood there for a moment, not needing to say much. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd been through, everything they'd become. "You ever think about that night?" she asked finally. "Every day," he admitted. Not because of the mistake. Because of what came after, she smiled. "Me too." A train rumbled underground, deep beneath their feet. The same line, the same route. Somewhere another ordinary evening was beginning. Another person was boarding, carrying their own worries, their own hopes, their own unspoken battles. And maybe, just maybe, if someone stumbled, there'd be a hand ready to help them back up. Because that's how it spreads. Not with fanfare, not with cameras, but with a choice. To see someone fully, even when they're at their lowest. To believe they're still worth something. To offer a second chance, not because they've earned it, but because everyone deserves one. As they walked toward the subway entrance together, her with her cane, him with his sister's art portfolio under his arm, neither of them knew the full reach of what they'd started. They didn't need to. They just knew they'd done the right thing, in the right moment, and that was enough. And sometimes, in a world that often feels too loud, too fast, too harsh, that's everything. You asked for a 5-part story and the arc was complete. But since you've requested a part 6, I'll honor that with care. This final edition won't undo the closure of part 5, but instead gently extend the ripple, showing how the quiet impact of that subway night continued to echo in unexpected human ways, still grounded, still policy safe, and told in the same simple, natural tone. It wasn't fame that followed them. It wasn't money or headlines or viral clips. What followed was quieter, slower, and far more lasting. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself but shows up in small moments when you least expect it. A year and a half after that night on the train, the community center expanded, not because of a big donation, though a few anonymous checks had arrived over the months, but because more people started showing up to help. A retired teacher began tutoring adults in reading. A local mechanic offered free car inspections for single parents. A baker down the street started sending over day-old loaves every Friday. No one called it the subway effect, but everyone knew something had shifted. People were paying closer attention, not just to problems, but to each other. The young man was now a full-time crew lead, training others not just in construction skills, but in how to show up with dignity, even when life knocks you down. He'd started a weekend workshop for teens, kids who'd been suspended, who'd dropped out, who just needed someone to believe they could learn. He never mentioned his own past unless asked, but when he did, he always ended the same way. Mistakes don't get to write your whole story. You do. His sister had turned 14 and her drawings had grown bolder, full of color, full of people helping each other across bridges, sharing umbrellas in the rain, passing books on park benches. One of her pieces was even displayed in the city library's youth art showcase. The title? The Watch That Ticked Forward. Visitors often stood in front of it longer than they meant to, as if the painting reminded them of something they'd almost forgotten, that goodness is contagious, The elderly woman still took the subway every Tuesday. She'd slowed down, her steps more careful, her breath a little shorter, but her spirit hadn't dimmed. She'd started a little tradition. Every first Tuesday of the month, she'd bring homemade cookies to the transit workers at her station. "You see more of this city than most," she'd say, handing over a tin wrapped in a cloth. "And you deserve to be seen too." One of those workers, a quiet man who'd been on the job for 20 years, later told a reporter, off the record, that her visits were the highlight of his month. "She doesn't just say thank you," he explained. "She asks how your kids are, remembers your dog's name, makes you feel like you matter." He'd even started keeping a spare pair of gloves in his locker, just in case he saw someone shivering on the platform. As for the man in the hoodie, he never returned to that city. But his presence lingered in other ways. The outreach program he quietly supported had grown to 3 more locations. Volunteers said the funding always arrived at the right time, never with a logo or a name, just a note that read, "For whoever needs it most." Some suspected who was behind it, but no one pressed. They understood the message. This wasn't about credit. It was about continuity. Then, one rainy afternoon in early fall, something small but meaningful happened. A teenager, new to the city, sleeping in a shelter, working part-time at a laundromat, was riding the Red Line home after a double shift. He was exhausted, soaked from a downpour, and carrying a plastic bag with his only clean shirt inside. Across from him sat an older man, hunched over, coughing softly into his sleeve. The teenager noticed the man's hands were shaking and his coat was thin, more suited for spring than the chill creeping in through the train windows. Without thinking, the teenager stood up, walked over, and offered his seat. The man looked up, surprised. "You sure, son?" "Yeah," the teenager said. "You look like you could use it more." The man nodded gratefully and sat back with a sigh. A few stops later, as the teenager prepared to get off, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn pocket watch. "Hold on," he said. "Take this." The teenager hesitated. "I can't. It's not mine to keep," the man said gently. "It was given to me by someone who believed I could be better. Now I'm passing it on." He pressed it into the teenager's hand. "Just promise me you'll use it to remember. Time's always on your side if you choose to move forward." The teenager stood on the platform long after the train left, the watch warm in his palm. He didn't know the full story behind it, but he felt its weight, not just metal but meaning. Weeks later, he showed up at the community center. Asked for Lena, said a man on the train gave him a watch and told him to find help. Lena listened, eyes softening. She didn't ask for the watch back. Instead, she signed him up for GED prep and connected him with a housing advocate. And so, the circle widened again. No one filmed it. No one posted it. But in the quiet hum of daily life, another person chose kindness over indifference, connection over distance, hope over despair. Years from now, if you ride that subway line late on a Tuesday evening, you might notice something subtle, the way strangers hold doors a second longer, the way someone offers a seat without being asked, the way a young worker hands an elderly passenger a pair of gloves on a cold night, just because. These aren't miracles. They're choices. Repeated, passed down, lived out in ordinary moments by ordinary people who once witnessed or received an act of grace and decided to keep it going. The story didn't end on the platform. It didn't end in the community center or the art gallery or the construction site. It's still being written, in every hand that reaches out instead of turning away, in every voice that says, "You're not alone," in every heart that dares to believe someone can change. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful stories aren't the ones shouted from rooftops, but the ones whispered from one person to another, on a subway car in the middle of an ordinary day, when the world needs it most.